They took the children on a Tuesday. Not all at once. Not with force. Quietly. Precisely. A child vanished from a school bus in Nebraska. Another from a beach in Perth. One walked into a forest in Norway and never came out. 72 children, gone without a trace, across different continents, different time zones, all under different skies. No ransom. No message. Just silence. Morgan Ryder noticed when his daughter, Lena, didn't come back from the barn. He had looked away for less than a minute. Her boots still sat by the door. Her favorite blanket was folded on the porch swing. The goats hadn't been fed, and Lena never forgot the goats. He called out her name until his voice cracked. He searched every inch of the property, rifle in hand, but he knew something was wrong before he finished the first sweep. There was no sign of a struggle, no broken fence, no tire tracks, just gone, like she had evaporated. The police were polite, concerned. They filed a report and told him not to panic. A local volunteer group offered drones and dogs, but Morgan didn't need them. He'd seen vanishings like this before, years ago, in places most people pretended didn't exist. He used to be the one finding the people who disappeared. Now he was on the other side. Morgan walked into his tool shed that night, opened the floor hatch beneath the firewood rack, and pulled up an old steel case he hadn't touched in 15 years. Inside were three things: a black coin-sized beacon, a sealed envelope, and a photo of Lena. He activated the beacon, lit the envelope with a match, and stared at the photo. They didn't take someone's daughter. They took his. Above the clouds, far past Earth's orbit, a Varnkai observation vessel drifted in stealth mode. Inside, long-fingered creatures studied flickering holograms of Earth's surface. The Varnkai were not a military species. They were intellectuals, pale-skinned, bioluminescent scientists devoted to curiosity. And to them, humans were a fascinating biological puzzle. Primitive, erratic, and emotionally volatile. The children were part of a long-term emotional response study. The Varnkai wanted to understand the neural triggers behind grief, bonding, loss. They harvested younglings to observe mourning patterns, biological decline in caregivers, and behavioral escalation in group dynamics. It was all for knowledge. Nothing personal, but something had gone wrong. One of their stealth drones, sent to monitor post-abduction behavior in North America, never returned. Another deployed over Europe went completely dark, its black box transmitting only static. Within 24 hours, 5 of their data relays dropped offline. At first, the Varnkai thought it was interference from human technology, but the interference was too clean, too targeted. Then came the message. It wasn't broadcasted over human airwaves or directed through military channels. It was injected into their own system, appearing across every terminal, in every Varnkai language simultaneously. Return what's ours, or burn. They found it amusing. A human threat embedded in their network? Curious. They didn't know Earth had developed neural injection codes. Hadn't expected this level of encryption, either. Their response team ran diagnostics, isolated the message, quarantined the breach. Until the ship's AI started playing music. A lullaby. One human children sang before bed. No source. No file trace. It simply played through the ship's comms. Over, and over, and over. That's when they began to worry. Back on Earth, Morgan received a ping. The signal was accepted. He walked outside under the stars, pulled a tarp off an old crate buried behind the chicken coop, and opened it. Inside, a modular weapon system older than Lena, heavily modified and illegal under every planetary ordinance. He spent the night assembling it. The Black Thorn had answered. They weren't a military. They weren't a government. They were what came after. Formed from the bones of a dozen Black Ops programs, former ghosts and burned spies who never stopped fighting. Men and women who owed Morgan favors. People who had lost children of their own. Within 12 hours, coordinated attacks began against every known satellite array linked to atmospheric anomalies, cutting off Earth skies from whatever tech the Varnkai used to come and go unseen. Someone hijacked the power grid of an observatory in Chile and used it to blind fire directed signals into orbit, scrambling alien lenses. In Berlin, a message was carved into a government building's rooftop in molten steel. You started this. The Varnkai Council convened in urgency. They had done this type of study before, on primitive species, even ones with language. There had never been a reaction like this. The humans weren't protesting. They weren't pleading. They were planning. Meanwhile, Lena sat in a sterile chamber aboard the Varnkai research cruiser, her wrists bound with a soft, shimmering material that tightened when she moved. There were others. Dozens. All children. They had been separated by age and monitored daily. They weren't tortured. They weren't hurt. But they were watched, as if they were animals in a zoo. And Lena didn't cry. Not once. She whispered things to the other kids. Told them her dad used to hunt bad people. That he'd find them. That he had friends. The guards didn't understand the words, but they noticed the change. The children grew bolder. Less afraid. One tried to bite a handler. Another broke a monitor. The Varnkai increased sedation cycles. They underestimated human children. At 0300, the lights dimmed without command. The temperature dropped 2 degrees. A new entry appeared in their central databanks. Child 51. Status, Spate. 3 research vessels lost contact within the next 6 hours. One was found adrift, atmosphere vented, hull covered in crude etchings. Images of grieving parents, flames, and one recurring phrase, "We warned you." In deep space, a small vessel with no registration exited dark warp and lashed onto the side of the primary research cruiser. No alarms were triggered, no defenses activated. The system didn't recognize it as a threat because it didn't recognize it at all. Morgan was already inside. The Varnkai didn't see him coming. The first was dead before it turned. The second begged, offering data, samples, insight. Morgan shot at mid-sentence. He found Lena in the core chamber, her eyes wide but calm. She didn't scream. She walked to him and said only one thing. "Are we going home?" Morgan looked at the camera watching them and nodded slowly. "No," he said. "Not yet." The feed went dark. Across 3 galaxies, a signal echoed through the Varnkai archives, crashing files, rerouting command logs, and deleting research records. Then, in one synchronized moment, every file, every terminal, every console on every ship displayed the same line. Kidnap human children. Prepare for extinction. The Varnkai still didn't understand what they'd done. Their leaders reviewed the emerging pattern of retaliation and labeled it tribal vengeance. A predictable, if primitive reaction. They believed they could wait it out. Humanity, they assumed, would move on. Grief faded. Anger burned itself out. It always had, until now. Because humans hadn't forgotten. They had focused. Morgan, Ryda wasn't operating alone anymore. The Black Thorn had activated fully. Not with armies or drones, but with people who had nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. Quiet operatives embedded in mundane roles, hydro-engineers, code-breakers, retired analysts, were now orchestrating what would later be called the Extinction Circuit. It started with a system map of every known Varnkai relay, a whisper network of orbital anomalies, blink drives, and camouflage supply points. Within 24 hours, 9 of them were neutralized. Not blown up, inverted. Someone had hijacked the gravitational compression fields to collapse inward, turning the stations into cold, silent knots of scrap. No explosions, no noise, just absence. The Varnkai panicked. The council called for emergency shields across their inner colonies, diverting resources from outer systems. Their mistake. On Earth, Morgan stood before a slab of concrete deep under a mountain. Before him, suspended in coolant, was a tactical AI he'd sworn never to reactivate. It was too unpredictable, too human. But now, he needed exactly that. The AI's name was hfysci, and it came online with a single line of code. "Your enemy took what you love. Shall I take what they fear?" "Yes," Morgan whispered. "Start with their children." hfysci didn't touch them physically. It accessed the Varnkai net of educational archives, corrupted their child development systems, and turned every learning module into a horror feed. Their young began to dream of fire, screams, and falling. The Varnkai sent a ceasefire signal to Earth's orbital diplomatic array. The message was never answered, because no one on Earth had started this war. Not the governments, not the military. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a reckoning. The Varnkai ships orbiting Jupiter began to vanish next. Not explode, vanish. Hulls ripped open without sound. Engines torn apart and left floating like corpses in space. One command ship's final transmission was a crew screaming while a child's laughter played in the background. That child's voice, Lena's. hfysci had recorded it. Morgan had approved it. Lena sat beside her father in the Thornspire's command chamber. She wore a headset too large for her head and spoke clearly into the mic. "Hi. If you hear this, you're not safe anymore." The Varnkai Council convened for the last time in their homeworld citadel, 12 shadowed figures around a frozen core of shimmering light. They spoke of containment, escape, sterilization. None of it would matter, because by then, the Black Thorn had already arrived. Not in fleets, but as data, as viruses, as whispers in the very systems the Varnkai trusted. On the outer colony of V9, the Varnkai governor tried to evacuate civilians. But every ship in port had been grounded. Their controls were fused. Over the loudspeakers, human music played, old Earth lullabies distorted into something eerie. And then a voice. "The price of curiosity is pain. The price of pain is fire." Explosions didn't follow. Instead, the environment control systems reversed polarity. Oxygen dropped. Heat failed. Then silence. Every time the Varnkai tried to defend, their weapons didn't fire. Their drones wouldn't deploy. Their emergency broadcast returned only one word: denied. On the research cruiser where the children had been kept, Morgan returned. The Varnkai scientists who remained were unarmed. They held out their hands, pleading in broken English, offering information and apologies. Morgan walked past them. He walked through corridors filled with the ghosts of trauma, with the etchings of children counting days in silence. He entered the containment wing, opened every door, led every child out. No words, no speeches, just motion. Outside, the Thornspire hovered in low orbit, invisible to most sensors, radiating a dead signature. As the last child boarded, Morgan turned back to the Varnkai ship, set a device on the floor, and spoke into his comm. "Flashlight, wipe it." A second later, the entire vessel froze. Not exploded, erased. Every byte of data, every map, every biological archive. Gone, like it never existed. Back in space, Morgan stood beside Lena. She looked up at him and asked, "What happens now?" Morgan didn't answer right away. He stared at the stars, then said, "Now they learn." The Thornspire moved, not toward home, but deeper into the stars, because there were still Varnkai left, still systems unburned, and the Black Thorn had a list. They didn't want peace. They wanted a warning carved into the bones of the galaxy, so no one would ever try it again. The Varnkai made their final mistake when they labeled humans as emotionally unstable. They called it a species flaw, a side effect of an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex. What they didn't understand was that emotion wasn't humanity's weakness. It was the trigger, and they had pulled it. Across the galactic core, Varnkai fleets scrambled to regroup. Remaining ships huddled around protected planets. Civilian transports flooded the lanes, running from systems marked by a single phrase etched into debris: "Justice is coming." The Varnkai High Command authorized full-spectrum defense, orbital cannons, intercept drones, psychic dampeners. It was already too late, because Earth hadn't sent fleets. Earth hadn't declared war. This wasn't a battle. It was a message, and the galaxy would learn it word by word. The planet Dughter, 4, a Varnkai Cultural Archive world, was the first to fall. Not for bombs, from confusion. All planetary systems were disabled in under 5 minutes by an invisible intrusion. When the Varnkai looked up, they saw clouds forming strange symbols, Earth characters, a phrase translated later by xenolinguists. Children for children. UO-72. An hour later, 72 identical human children appeared across their cities. Not the originals, just images, holograms. Each child stood motionless, staring, silent, unblinking. Every screen on the planet began playing Earth nursery rhymes on loop, distorted just enough to unsettle. A Varnkai official shot one of the projections in panic. Nothing happened, until, one by one, real children across the planet stopped responding. A plague? A virus? No, just systems crashing. Digital interfaces locking up. Educational modules failing. Their children weren't dying. They were forgetting. Speech vanished. Memory blanked. A generation wiped blank without blood. That was the message. Now you know how it feels. Morgan didn't gloat. He wasn't watching from orbit, sipping victory. He was underground, silent, overseeing Phase 3. The Blackthorn had split into 6 shadow cells across 3 sectors. Their purpose wasn't destruction, it was demonstration. Let the Varnkai live long enough to fear. Let them whisper Earth's name like a curse. Each cell struck differently. One infiltrated the Varnkai judicial AI systems and reclassified every child abduction as an interstellar war crime, punishable by extinction. Another replaced public archives with recordings from Earth parents, real ones, begging for their children's return, weeping, screaming, dying inside. On Varnkai Prime, the capital's central monument was found draped in fabric. No entry detected, no guards harmed, just a symbol drawn in ash, a small human handprint. Below it, a child's voice recording. We remember everything. It wasn't warfare. It was a haunting. The galaxy began to respond. Other species, neutral, careful, uninvolved, started severing ties with the Varnkai. Not out of politics, out of fear. Whispers of a human's wrath spread like wildfire. They didn't conquer. They corrected. They didn't take planets. They erased lines in the stars. A mercenary outpost in deep void space picked up a distress call from a fleeing Varnkai diplomat. Before they could reply, the diplomat's ship vanished from sensors. In its place appeared a strange transmission. We offered peace. You wanted data. We gave pain. You will log it in your bones. By the time the diplomat's craft was found, its databanks were surgically purged. Crew intact. Memories gone. Identities deleted. Just breathing, blinking shells with no past. On a quiet moon, a group of Varnkai scientists tried to surrender. They broadcast their coordinates on every known channel, pleading for asylum, offering to testify. Morgan intercepted the transmission. He didn't send weapons. He sent ashlight. Within seconds, every light on the moon flickered. Every surface turned a mirror. The scientists were forced to see themselves, dozens, hundreds, reflections staring back. And every mirror whispered the same phrase in a child's voice. You watched us cry. Now watch yourselves disappear. No blood spilled. No fire rained down. But when a neutral salvage crew arrived 3 days later, they found no signs of life. Only footprints. In circles. And silence. The Varnkai council fractured. Some demanded negotiation. Others fled into hiding. One faction suggested full retaliation. That faction's warships were all found drifting within 20 hours, their crews missing. In their place, data files sent back to their capital, childhood drawings of Earth kids, spaceships, families, monsters, and one recurring image, a hand reaching out, then closing into a fist. Ashlight modified their symbols, warped their icons, hijacked their language. Soon, their very alphabet became hostile. Every message they typed began twisting, letters rearranged into warnings, cries, and taunts. Their world was now haunted by the very concept of child. It meant terror. It meant vengeance. It meant humanity was watching. Morgan spoke once, only once, to the Varnkai broadcast net. No video, just voice. You studied our pain like it was a chart. You dissected our grief like it was a game. So here's your final data point. You taught us how to punish without killing. Congratulations. You're the experiment now. Across the stars, the words echoed. Not shouted. Whispered. Chilling. Inevitable. The Varnkai didn't just lose a war. They lost their place in the galaxy. Their species' name became a curse. And the children of Earth slept safely again. Because the monsters who took them were gone. The galaxy changed in silence. No treaties. No public announcements. Just a long, quiet pause, where the stars stopped feeling safe for anyone who ever thought humans were fragile. The Varnkai had ceased retaliating, not from weakness, from certainty. Certainty that the next move wouldn't just end their empire, it would unmake them. Entire colonies had gone dark. No attacks, no invasions, just erased footprints and the eerie feeling that someone had been there and left nothing behind. In the ashes of every act, there were patterns. The same number repeated. 72. 72 flashes of light across a moon surface. 72 encrypted signals echoing back from deep space. 72 childlike voices stitched into static. 72 reasons never to touch Earth again. The final blow wasn't fire. It wasn't a weapon. It was memory. Ashlight, The AI the Varnkai had tried to trace injected itself into their historical archives and rewrote their legacy from the inside out. The stories their species told about their achievements, their advancements, their noble research, gone. Replaced with footage of Lena, of children crying in dim cells, of desperate parents on Earth clawing at the unknown. The Varnkai were forced to live with it. Every colony, every hub, every database, marked. No matter how far they fled, no matter how deep they buried their backups, it always came back. The truth was unkillable now, and that was the sentence. Not death. Permanent recognition. The kind they had denied those 72 children. Morgan didn't return to Earth. He never intended to. The Thornspire became legend. A myth whispered in trading hubs and war camps. A ghost ship that only appeared when children screamed across the void. Some claimed he had become more than human, a specter in armor, carrying Earth's fury in his chest like a dying star. Others said he had vanished in a deep space, his mission complete, ashes cooled. But the Black Thorn didn't disappear. They just stopped speaking. Their silence was the warning. Humanity, meanwhile, never made an official statement. No leaders stood before cameras. No footage was ever shown to the public. The entire incident was buried beneath layers of denial and false reports. The missing children were simply marked found in quiet paperwork, handed back to their families without explanation. Lena returned home different. Not broken, just sharpened. She never spoke much about what happened. She spent most of her time outside, watching the stars, sketching what she remembered. Not the ships, not the labs, the faces. At night, she kept a knife under her pillow, and a photograph of her father beside it. Whispers spread across the interstellar community, not of war, but of the line, the one you don't cross, the one you don't test. And that line was drawn in the form of a human child. Alien governments rewrote policies overnight. Trade agreements with Earth suddenly included full protections for all minors. Entire interspecies conferences were canceled, restructured, or reclassified to exclude any group that once sided with the Varnkai. No one wanted to be mistaken for a threat. Even species that had long mocked humans for their emotional instability quietly installed statues of children at their embassies. Memorials, they called them. Symbolic gestures of respect. But really, they were shields. Proof that they had learned, that they understood, that they wanted no part of what came next. In the dark corners of pirate channels and criminal syndicates, rumors persisted that other species had tried similar things, experimenting, abducting, poking the human psyche to see what would happen, and that those species weren't around anymore because the humans didn't send warnings twice. Their justice wasn't measured in law. It was measured in memory. There's an old Varnkai saying now, new, bitter, whispered like a curse among their fractured kind. They gave us fire, and we thought it was light, but it was always a torch. The last message ever intercepted from the Thornspire wasn't a threat. It wasn't even in code. It was a single human voice, calmly transmitted through frequencies too old for most systems to track. No name, no identification, just a tone. If you harm our children, we won't invade. We won't negotiate. We won't stop. We will erase your legacy. And your last word will be regret. Then silence. That's all that remains. No monument. No body count. No flag planted. Just a memory burned so deep into the galactic spine that entire species teach it in schools now. Not as history, but as warning. So when the stars blink strangely, when an old lullaby plays with no source, when a name Earth appears in systems it was never supposed to touch, everyone remembers. Not because they saw it happen, but because someone, somewhere took a child, and the humans answered.